and Louis told me, listen, if you have to tell people who I am, then I shouldn't be here. Just tell them Louis come to talk. So I don't think that I need to tell you who Marshall Cattle is. Marshall Cattle come to talk. Marshall, please.
Good evening. Last time I was in this hall, well, I would have to say that the St. Joseph branch was responsible for helping me go a little bit viral during the campaign, because this was the hall where I made a small joke that ended up going all over the world. So I gotta thank St. Joseph family for that. But it is always good to come out and share with the Barbados Labour Party family outside of St. Michael. It is always good to be a part of the reason that we are here, to be a part of that reason in different communities and in different places, and to be a part of the fellowship with the Barbados Labour Party family. So I'm very happy for this invitation. I'm very happy for the opportunity to come and share with you. Now, this is an important time, I feel, and I hope that you all feel it too, in the history of this country. And this gentleman to my right, who likes to smile a lot and seem quite modest, has been a huge part of that, and has quite honestly been, for many of us who are new to this business of political life, has been an inspiration and has been a model of implementation, something that we're trying to get done by comparison certainly to the last administration. But it is a new dispensation. We have before us a task that is huge. And we have before us an opportunity that I don't think another administration will get for some time. It is an opportunity to change not just the variables that you would hear me and others, and Ambassador Maskell and others talking about, not just those numbers and those variables, but it is an opportunity to change fundamentally the way we do the business of government and the way that we run the institutions of government. So last week saw the beginning of the first estimates of your new Barbados Labour Party government. And it was different than the past 10 years in many ways, not least of all because they actually add up. But one of the most important things about the new format is that it shows that the commitment that we've talked about to transparency, the work that Dale and others are doing on integrity, is not just about words, it's much deeper than words. It is about revealing not just what is being spent, not just why it is being spent, but it is about revealing really how government works. It is about revealing who is responsible for making things happen and what are all the systems that need to be in place in order for things to happen. So you saw that ministers who are responsible for setting the policy agenda sat together with their teams who are responsible for advice, who are responsible for managing, who are responsible for implementation. And they sat together before the House and before the people of this country to tell the people of Barbados what the money is being spent on, but beyond that, how they will ensure that it is spent efficiently and that programs are being run effectively. So how they are going to make sure that the money was spent on what you were told that it would be spent on, and that after it is spent, that you can see the results and the benefit of that money being spent. So that you're all also seeing the reality of the how policy is implemented, and hearing firsthand from those that are doing the work what the challenges were and perhaps why it didn't happen as planned. And I think that is important, because one of the reasons that people are able to do the things that they're not supposed to do, and one of the things that people do to try and make it seem like magic, is that they keep information to themselves. And the truth is, everything that we go to work to do every day is your business. There is nothing, save for matters of national security, in which certainly the AG will be involved, that we should be talking about, spending money on, discussing, implementing, executing, that people should not know about. So this new process also allows the public to inside, because it's not a black box, it's not a mystery, it's not magic. We set an agenda and we have to execute it, and there are people who are responsible for that. So it allows the public insight to see the management and the workings and the governance, not just of what we do in the central government and in those ministries, but also what happens in state-owned enterprises. And you would have heard a lot of conversation about how state-owned enterprises are run. And one of the things that we had to insist on under the Burt plan was that entities report, send financial reports and send updated management accounts so that we know what is going on. And that they do this on the 5th of the month, by the 5th of the month, every month. And we had to bring that kind of discipline in because it was missing for the last 10 years. And when you're not giving people information, well, it's easy for you to say, well, we don't know, we don't have the evidence, we can't say. And it is easy to hide, and therefore to do perhaps things that you shouldn't be doing. But I want to say something else about our approach to governance of state-owned enterprises like the Water Authority, like the Transport Board, like the Sanitation Service Authority, and others. You would have seen in the well of the House as well, chairpersons of boards. And these entities are run, part of the governance structure involves boards. And one of the things certainly I heard from my contemporaries, young people, was that they felt that this business of helping to govern and helping to make decisions, they did not have any access to. And one of the things that we have done and wanted to make sure that we did was to change the face a bit of what some of these boards look like. We think that this is a place where you can start to introduce new ways of thinking, bringing people who have not always been there. We spend a lot of time and money educating young people and then telling them to wait their turn. And that turn may not come until they are 60-something. What we need to do and what we have done is to bring into the management and the governance of what we're doing is to use it to give opportunities to young people. Because decisions cannot just be made by a political directorate. When we talk about being inclusive, we need to get the ideas and the decisions being made by people other than ourselves. And what we need to do is to make sure that those decisions are being made in the context of what we call good governance, that there are rules, that there's predictability in how people report on things. But the point I wanted to make about the approach to governance is that it's not just about what we would call the political class. It's about making sure that all kinds of people are around the table and sharing their views. And it's also making sure that we are also benefiting from the views and the ideas and the criticism of the public and the people of Barbados. Now, with respect to the estimates, we've had some feedback, and there are those who would want to suggest that the rigor that we are seeking to bring to these estimates is diluted when a government with a majority like ours is asking itself questions. And you've heard that feedback, I'm sure. But this is what I would say to those people. The last 10 years have taught us that we have to govern not just for ourselves and for our own intentions and for today, but we have to govern for the worst of what might come. And in fact, we have to govern for the last administration, who did not govern. So we have to make sure that the things that they were able to do under the cover of darkness, the things they were able to do that brought this country to its knees economically and socially and institutionally, those things can never happen again. And that we can never end up here again. So for those people who say, well, what is this? We all asking yourselves questions. Two things. One is that as the Member of Parliament for St. Michael's South Central, when I sit in that house, that is who I am. And while we are part of the policy making of government as a cabinet, we also have a right and a responsibility to make sure that across the sectors that are represented, that are bringing their heads during the estimates, that we show that we are accountable to the people who elected us to represent their interests. And it is an opportunity for us to do that. But the second thing I would say is that, ironically, the systems that are required for democracy to really work, systems like this, where the estimates are really questioned, are coming in now with a Barbados Labour Party administration that has a clear and decisive and unprecedented majority. And I say that to say that it didn't have to happen. There are other governments that perhaps would not have taken the opportunity to put these things in place. But we have decided that this Barbados Labour Party administration is about transformation. It is about putting things in place not just for how we know that we function, not just for how we intend to function, but we have to govern to make sure that we do not ever see Barbados run like it was run for the last 10 years. And that's what these estimates and this new format has been about. Because if this format had been in place for the last 10 years, you would not have seen, as the country learned last week during the estimates, 4 million of your dollars being wasted in digital ID cards that sat down in storage for the last 7 years until they could not be used anymore. Because if this process had been in place 10 years ago, the following year, after those monies were voted for those cards, the minister would have had to come before the House and justify why they were asking for more money to carry out a digital agenda when they had not delivered what was in the estimates last year. That's what they would have had to do. And sometimes things happen. The point is not to create a perfect world where nothing ever happens that might get in the way of implementation. The point is to be accountable. The point is to face it and fix it, and to let the country know how you are fixing it. If this format had been in place 10 years ago, we would not now still be paying back US $5 million for something that is called an electronic single window. Now, an electronic single window is something online, a platform, a website that allows you as a trader, a company that wants to trade with Barbados or anywhere, to come online and register all of your information in one place so that trade is easy. And it's supposed to help countries grow. It's supposed to help countries get more exports out, get more imports in, do their business more easily. So it's a good idea, it's a good thing. But we borrowed money for a competitiveness project that was meant to implement an electronic single window that was launched on Valentine's Day of 2017 and has not worked a day since. And I don't know if that says something about not starting things on Valentine's Day and expecting them to last. But if you try to go to the website now, it is going to say, and perhaps this is not unlike members of the last administration, website cannot be reached. So all of that money that went in to building that site and launching, that we are still paying for now, gave us nothing. But you know, apart from the transparency and apart from the information sharing and the accountability, the truth is that something else has to be behind the new format for estimates. It's not just the will to be able to do things better, but there also has to be the means to implement and the discipline to implement and to keep following through as a government on implementation. And it calls for things that are not so sexy. It calls for better internal processes. So let me give you an example. We are now going to be introducing something that we call an electronic dashboard, a very simple thing. And this electronic dashboard is to manage big public investments. So things like fixing roads or building schools or anything that is a large public capital investment. And that allows for two things. It allows us to see exactly what we are doing, to manage ourselves internally and manage what we're doing. But it also allows anybody who has an interest in these projects to see where projects are and what or who we are waiting on for the projects to proceed. And we think that this kind of transparency is going to help projects move along, so that no one is anymore going to be able to hide behind the idea that a file is with somebody else. And you know, I'm afraid to tell you that when somebody from government told you in the past, whenever you called on a matter and you were told that the file was with somebody else, it was actually a large file that was held together with treasury tags and had to go via messenger from one place to another and be registered in the registry. And if I am sitting in Warrens and I have a file to send to Kurt, who is working in Charnox, it's going to take some time to get there. By the time it gets there, he might have gone home for the day, and that's another 24 hours that we have to wait to get something done. So every person who's relevant to this process is going to have access to this dashboard, so that you can, including the Prime Minister, who can look and see, well, listen, this thing is with the AG and it's been there for 7 days and it really should have left within 2 days, and what's going on? And these are things that seem a little boring and a little mundane, but these are the things that allow us to implement. These are the things that when you have a matter with town planning or when you have a matter anywhere in government, that allow you to see what is happening. But sometimes the misuse or the mismanagement or the delay when it comes to government resources is not always about outright dishonesty and corruption. Sometimes it is about a lack of capacity to negotiate the best deal and to get the best value for money. And some of the negotiations that we have to do on behalf of government are very specialized things. And it means that there may be not a lot of expertise in government. And that's one of the reasons that we saw, I believe, apart from the corruption, I think it's one of the reasons that we saw contracts over the last 10 years that were egregious, that saw somebody getting a lot of value while the government of Barbados did not get any. And sometimes it's not about corruption, sometimes it's about the fact that people probably don't understand what they are negotiating and what they're negotiating for. So in order to safeguard the public, what we're looking to do is develop the capacity for that negotiation, to develop a panel of negotiators who are experienced, who are approved, who are qualified, so that they can be quickly and confidently deployed when they are needed to make sure that some of these contracts that were revealed to you after the last 10 years do not repeat themselves. And these are people who are product specialists, who are working in their areas and who are used as needed. These are not permanent advisors to the government. But the point is that it is all right to acknowledge, and it is important in fact to acknowledge, that we don't always have somewhere sitting down in a government office the skills that are required. We have to constantly train, and that's part of the retooling program is for that. But in the meantime, we cannot afford to lose important and scarce government resources because we may not necessarily have the capacity to negotiate in one area or the other. Now, I won't speak to you too long today, but I feel as if I have to address another area that has been under discussion a lot, and it is the idea of growth. Now, despite this new level of transparency and frankness and openness of government, there are people out there who perhaps deliberately choose not to see or choose not to hear. It happens. And normally, you would see that from people who are pretending to innocently ask a question, but really they have other motives, but that's okay. So take the issue of growth. This Barbados Labour Party government has been very clear. We've been very clear in saying that growth is the only way that we are going to truly recover from the lost decade, and growth, inclusive growth, is the plan. You've heard us say that many times. Strategy is not words. A real growth strategy is a plan that connects. It is not just saying that we should export more, urging us to be more productive, but it focuses on how. It focuses on taking the right steps in the right order. And of all of the things that are very nice to do, what is it that we have to do now? And what is it that we can afford to do now? Now, we've just come through, or we are going through an estimates process, and we are also implementing the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. It means that we do not have all the space and all the money and all the resources in the world to do everything that we would want. And I'm not going to go over all the reasons why, because all the reasons why have to do with the mismanagement of the last 10 years. But the fact is that we have decided to take the bold steps that are necessary. You look at Jamaica. Jamaica has been in a dance with the IMF now for the last many years. And I'll tell you why. When Jamaica first started to try to do its recovery, it tried to do things slowly. Because perhaps the government of that time was afraid that any bold movements would make people concerned. And so Jamaica tried to remove the plaster slowly. You know when you try not to hurt yourself, but really at the end it's still gonna hurt. And the more quickly you do it, the less it's gonna hurt, because the pain, while we acknowledge that it exists, is gonna last for a shorter time. And there are countries like Jamaica that took a long time, and during that time, the economy was uncertain, people were not willing to invest, and regular people were hurting for a long time. And this Barbados Labour Party government decided that that is not the way to fix all of the mistakes of the last 10 years. That the way to do it is to be bold and to make hard decisions that the truth is the last government was not willing to do. And that those that sit on the sidelines now, not sit because they don't have any seat, but the ones that stand on the sidelines now and make all these proclamations would have been hard-pressed to do. This government said, listen, enough of the foolishness. We got to make these decisions now. And we are making these decisions in a context that is about scarcity. But we are going to make them. So for those who are out there who keep on saying that we don't have a growth strategy, I want to say the following. There are certain clear steps to growth, and I have outlined 7 here. But I also want to say that we are not in the business of saying what people expect or want to hear, because what people expect or want to hear is not necessarily what is going to work for Barbados now in 2019. We have never been here before, ever. We have never been at a place where economically we are completely spent, or were when we came to government 9 months ago. Where socially, every social institution now needs to be rebuilt. And really where every governance institution also needs to be rebuilt. We've not been here before. But the growth strategy of this government really is about 7 straightforward steps. 7 steps that have been ordered carefully. And because this is a real plan, and not just words, you will see that we have done a couple already, and that we're doing a couple now, and that we have more that we are planning to do shortly. But the order is important. We cannot go for growth when there's no foreign currency in the central bank. So we had to build that first. We had to put the dollar in a safe place first. And so last year was necessarily about building up the reserves, which in 9 months have more than doubled and are now almost 3 times what they were then. We cannot go for growth when the government manages its finances so badly that everybody's behavior is driven by the timing of when they get a refund or when a contract will be paid. And I want to give you an example. The people of St. Michael South Central have been, rightly, calling, sending messages, asking questions about Flagstaff Road. Flagstaff Road was a gift in the condition that it was from the last administration, who somehow could not manage to complete it. The reason that they could not manage to complete it is that they managed their cash flow and their finances so badly that they could not pay the contractor for each stage of work that the contractor was doing. Now this is a company, and we understand how small contractors in this country work. You need the cash flow from the payments that you get to put back into the company, to pay workers, to allow your business to operate. And you will see that there were lots of small and medium-sized companies that failed, or that found themselves in a cash-strapped position and couldn't get more work because of a government that did not pay its bills. So a necessary step to growth is to make sure that the government is putting money back into the economy so people can spend. Last year was also necessarily about getting down the debt, making sure government can pay what it owes, when it owes, and not years later. And that has the effect of removing uncertainty that stops people in their tracks and makes them too afraid to invest, makes them too afraid to take a risk and to contribute to growth in the economy. We didn't do things instead of prioritizing growth. We didn't do those things because we weren't focused on growth. We did these things because they were the necessary steps that's going to get the economy growing again, and not just growing for a few, but growing for everybody. We cannot grow if it is hard and time-consuming and uncertain for people who want to start a business, to get government permission, or to get a construction permit. Growth comes from good regulations that are done quickly, that are done predictably and transparently. So for example, that's what the New Town Planning Act, the New Planning and Development Act is all about. Because before, I think it was over 240 days that they said it took a planning application to get a decision on a planning application. An economy cannot grow when you have to wait for almost a year or more than a year. I think there were some files that we saw that were 7, 8, 9 years old. Those people have left the country. Those people have invested in St. Lucia or Grenada. So the New Town Planning Act now says to people who work in the planning department, well, you have between 6 weeks and 16 weeks, depending on the kind of application, to get an approval or a refusal. The New Town Planning Act says, we're not just going to tell you no to an application. We're going to tell you, this is what would get your application approved. Because we don't want to send people away. This is not government simply by policing. We want to encourage people to invest in their country. Or we want to encourage people who are coming in to come and invest in Barbados. So it's not just about saying no, it's about facilitating what people want to do. Growth also comes from getting a fair return for your work and a fair return for your investment. People are not going to put in their savings in something that is risky if they feel that even if it works out, they don't get to keep enough of the profit that they've made after they pay all the fees and the charges and the taxes. And so that's why we have done this major tax reform of businesses as part of a rolling reform for our entire tax system. Growth comes from making sure people have access to finance, which is one of the reasons that we started the trust loans. But it's also the reason that we are developing new ways to get savings working for the country. We have $10 billion in savings in this economy. So that this year, what you're going to see is new regulations for what we call crowdfunding, so that people can put their money, regular people can put their money into investments so that they can see a real return. You know, I always say that this generation of politics and politicians and governance is not just about getting people a salary that they can pay bills and have nothing left back. This new generation of politics and governance has to be about creating wealth for regular people. And so these new ways to mobilize savings, like getting people, regular people, to invest in businesses, tapping into the savings of the diaspora, people, Barbadians that live all over the world and have resources to bring to this economy. New ways to pay for things so that you don't have to pay all of these bank fees and bank charges. Those are the kinds of things that get the economy growing. Growth comes from people being able to deliver things. Goods and services have to travel easily in order for us to grow. So what do we need to do? We need to repair the roads and the port and the infrastructure. And we need to invest in the future ways that things are going to be delivered. So developing broadband technology and these things that connect us to bigger markets that are further away. It is expensive to ship anything outside of Barbados and in the region. And more, we are going to have to focus on exporting things that don't have to go to a port and sit down for days. Things that you can just hit send and send overseas and earn an income for it. That is why in these estimates, we are spending over $180 million on infrastructure development, and why we are piloting free broadband connections in Bridgetown. Because these are the things that are going to get goods and services moving, not just in the country, but outside of the country. And all of this is going to generate growth. And we're going to get more growth because we are committed to getting value for money in the way that government spends. But true growth that is inclusive and that is lasting has to be centered on our people. And the way that our country and our people grow is by doing things that people want, doing things that are in demand, that the rest of the world is going to pay us for. And that's why we continue in these estimates, and we will continue to protect spending on education, spending on training, and spending on health. It's why we reintroduce free tertiary education, and why we're setting up a school that looks at coding and developing capacity and training in new ways of learning that are going to earn people a decent income. So the 7 steps and levers to growth, building our reserves to help us grow and keep the dollar strong, that needed to be done. Managing public finances so that government spends what it can afford and pays what it owes, that needed to be done. And that includes looking at how we procure and how we make government goods and services available for new kinds of procurement. You know, one of the things that we said in the discussion on the retrenchment is that we are not going to be able to protect every job, but we are going to protect every Barbadian. And work is going to look different. You know, in St. Michael South Central, we've set up what we call a skills bank. So what we are doing is we are helping people who may have been separated from the public service, who may have been working as a landscaper in the Ministry of Agriculture, or who may have been working in some other area, helping them set up businesses that they can go and bid for government goods and services, so that these resources do not always have to go to a large company or go outside of the country, but that they stay in the community and that people are able to access it. The third step to growth is making sure that we remove the time and the cost and the bureaucracy of government. Making sure that we cut the taxes that are paid by local businesses so that they can use that money to invest in other things. Making sure that we repair the transport and the communication network, from repaving roads to making broadband connectivity a reality. Improving access to finance, revamping the education and training agenda that trains people for the work of the future. So the growth strategy then is to take these 7 levers and to apply them across the productive sectors, old sectors and new. So that in tourism, for instance, your government has been able to leverage the new planning and development approach, the new tax rates, the new infrastructure spend to attract investors who now have planning approvals for hotels with 1,500 new hotel rooms and 3,000 new permanent jobs. And I don't tell you this to pronounce. I tell you this for you to get a sense of the scale of the impact of the growth strategy. Because we are not in the business of promising, we are in the business of delivering. So we're only going to count these projects in our economic numbers when they have started. The 7 levers to growth are designed to build new productive sectors, especially in the renewable energy sector. We are talking about solar, wind, biofuel, waste to energy, battery storage, all areas where we are developing learning, where we have people who, right here in Barbados, are among the first movers in the world in some of these areas. Government has been working with developers that are interested in building state-of-the-art facilities to house research, development, and manufacturing of renewable energy products. And this is possible because of government's role in facilitating investment. We aim to galvanize these high-tech renewable sectors through policies like the ban on plastics that I'm sure Kirk is going to come and talk to you about, through our goal of being fossil fuel free by 2030, through new rules around data protection and protecting personal medical information. I spoke a couple days ago to open a regional conference on research, medical research in ophthalmology. And sitting in that small room at Accra were Barbadians and people from the region who are among the leading thinkers and medical practitioners in all of the areas in ophthalmology. Now that sounds a little bit boring and not very interesting, but what does it mean? It means that we have the capacity right here to set up a new eye clinic, to do the kind of research and send out to the rest of the world that they are willing to pay us for. And that is a part of the new growth strategy. A part of the new growth strategy is an approach to agriculture and food security that does not seek to be all things to all people. And these are perhaps some of the things that we've gotten wrong in the past. But because you've gotten it wrong in the past doesn't mean that you stop making the effort in the sector. A new approach gets people working in the sector through access to land and greenhouses that focus on making sure we have a market in certain key things, that we can supply tomatoes and onions and sweet potatoes to the hospitality sector. We don't have to supply everything we can't. But that we make sure that through that strategy, farmers have a guaranteed income at the end of the month. A part of the strategy is to make sure that we strengthen our linkages as part of the CSME, because our neighbors like Guyana and Suriname have the capacity and the land and the wherewithal to help bring about real food security, and that has to be part of the strategy. And we like to hear about sectors, and that has been the way in the past that we've looked at this business of growth. But the world is changing, and the way that we really have to look at inclusive growth, at job-led growth, is to make sure that we make it easy for anybody with any idea in any sector to succeed, to do well, and to employ other people. There are few governments around the world and across history who can say 9 months on, 9 months into substantial reforms and modernization that they're continuing to follow and to deliver on their manifesto. And we can say that. A lot of the mission critical agenda is well underway. And we know because we check ourselves. We don't plan to wait till the end of 5 years to see if we are delivering on our promises. We sit and make sure that we are. And we are not triumphalists. There's a lot more to be done, but we are following a plan. The economy has been stabilized, and we are working hard, as Kurt's face might show you.
I know you said not sure. Okay.
But we are working hard on recovery and transformation. The estimates that we presented last week and that we are going to continue to present over the coming days are about implementing the plan, and it remains a heavy task. This year is a critical year in a multi-year plan. A lost decade is not going to be reversed in 9 months. But we have the commitment, we believe, of Barbadians who are willing to be a part of the fact that we are not seeking to put the burden in one place. And so our strategy has been one, we believe, of solidarity. And we think that that's the reason for the smell of hope and of change and of confidence in the air. And so we know that as long as we hold true to the principles on which we were elected, the principles of this Barbados Labour Party, the principles that were settled in the covenant of hope that we will not lose sight of, we believe that as long as we hold true to those things, we and Barbados are going to succeed. Because we believe that we will have had and will have your committed support throughout this fight. And as long as we have that, we cannot and will not fail. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcia. I'm not the chairman, it's just that Marcia sits at one end of the table and Kurt sits almost across from me, so I thought it would be good for me to introduce them both to you, our two raisings, the future of not just politics but governance in Barbados. Marcia had to have people to show her the way. Marcia had problems finding St. Joseph. I told her when you get to Groves Corner, turn left. And then she asked me where Groves Corner is. Kurt came across April and ended up going down East Coast and coming up. Anyway, Kurt, let me just introduce you to the wonderful people of St. Joseph, and I'm sure that they're looking forward to all that you have to say. Kurt?
Thank you very much, E.G. A very good afternoon to all at the head table, my colleague Minister Cattle, colleague Minister Griffith, and good afternoon to everybody again. Let me begin by saying that A.G. is normally a very honest man, but on this occasion he chose to introduce me with something a little bit far from the truth. I did not ramble. Google brought me safely here. And it is always a good thing to be here. The last time we were here for a political meeting, I didn't have the opportunity then to speak, and I was there chomping at the bits. You know, we were in the midst of an election campaign, and I wasn't given the opportunity then. And I think Dale invited me to speak at one meeting during the election, and it was a clash, and I didn't get here then either. So I'm really, really very happy to be here. And trust me when I say to you that I never take it for granted that I am standing here. There are times I don't believe that this is truly my story, and that one day Kirk Humphrey would be standing in Grantley Adams School, named after the great Grantley Adams, speaking on behalf of the Barbados Labour Party. To me, that in many ways is a dream come true. And before I speak to the few things I want to talk about, let me just say that in the last few months, I mean, most of you all know we've done a lot of work, but in the last few months, I have actually worked with your representative fairly closely, and I have grown in leaps and bounds in respect for the Attorney General. And that is the amount of work that the AG has done in such a limited space of time is indeed phenomenal. And I will tell you, there was a night I messaged Dale about probably after 11, thinking I would get a response early in the morning, only to see Dale is typing at about midnight. And between him and myself, and this is a true story, we were on the phone. Hey, he was dictating to me the legal jargon to use, and I was typing it in into a document that we were preparing, because this is a government that actually gets down and we do the work. We're not waiting for anybody to tell us what to do or how it's to be done. We actually do the work. And although I said that we've done a lot of work, and the truth is, if you look at the record, we've brought a lot of things to Parliament in a very short time, and everything you see we bring to Parliament is as a result of the government, but certainly as a result of the Attorney General, except that he thinks we need to bring more things to Parliament and to continue this workload. But we are working steadfastly on your behalf, trying to bring about some change to a country that in many ways we found in a state that it would be criminal if I didn't call it criminal. And what we found in many ways was shocking. When normally a government comes into power in any country, there are a few things that you want to achieve, you know? There are a few things that would catapult an opposition into government, especially if a government is performing badly. But in this case, you could practically pick anything, any area, any sector, and realize that the other government, the former government, was underperforming. You could put them into a hat and shake the hat as rigorously as you want and have somebody who has nothing to do with this Barbados Labour Party pick something. And then you would see that whatever came out of that hat was a sector in which the government was underperforming. And so we would normally say, what are the critical issues that we must now go into government and correct? And we started listing them. I remember the meeting, we started saying these are the mission critical issues. We were at 1, 2, 3. I'm not lying. 4, 5, 6. All of these many issues that we determined we now have to fix. And therefore, I find it somewhat amusing. And I often say these things would be comic if they were not so tragic. That the same people who brought Barbados to its knees now have so much to say about a government that is working so hard for the people of this country. And I see the memes and the stupid little things in social media. The innuendo trying to suggest, there was one in particular that I know laughing at, in which they're saying something about corrupt politicians like the AG and the Minister of Maritime Affairs. But they can't point to no area where either myself or the AG corrupt. And all kinds of stupid things, trying to distract people from the mission. But I know this Labour Party will not be distracted. And I know the people of Barbados are a lot wiser than the Democratic Labour Party gave them credit for. That is why they spoke to them the way they did on May 24th. But we now have a lot of work to do. And I want to begin by saying to you, the first thing that we have to do as a government, and that you must do as a people, is stay focused and to stay the course. So there are many people whose only job at the end of the day is to go on social media, to go on the call-in programs, and try to make all that we are doing seem like nothing. That's their job. Their job is to pick at some little thing and try to make it into an issue when they know there are no issues. Every country that I've been to since we came into office, and we've had to travel, especially in the Caribbean, every single country in the Caribbean, every time, is thankful to see Mia Motley lead this country, and I wonder how did Barbados do it? So I ain't getting tired. And I'm telling you all, don't get tired. Because that's their job. You know, they ain't doing nothing. You know, they should do that. When we play dominoes, sometimes if you're not winning, my partner will say to me, you ain't using your head, use your hands. They ain't using the head, go and clean seaweed or beautify Barbados. Use your hands. Do something. But stay out of the conversation. Let the people that have to work do the work. And there's a lot of work to do. Look, I have responsibility, and I will be quick because I know sometimes it gets dark rather fast, and because Google brought me here, I will need Google to take me back home, and I don't want that to happen in the dark. But let me tell you about a few of the areas that I have responsibility for. Marsha could do it. I mean, if Marsha speaks in real detail about the state of the economy, we'll be speaking forever. Let me tell you about a few of the areas that I have. I have responsibility for the port. I have responsibility for the fish markets. Generally, I have responsibility for fisheries. I have responsibility for shipping, and I have responsibility basically for fleshing out this idea of the blue economy. And in a word, or in a very short phrase, The blue economy really is about how do we preserve this thing we call the ocean while at the same time using it to make some revenue for the country. That's just a very general idea as to what it is. But how do we make the ocean work for us when we recognize the ocean is 400 times bigger, our ocean space, 400 times and more bigger than our land space? And what is the value of that? And how does that translate into something beneficial for Barbados? And how do we make the most of it? And in many cases, we have not assigned a value to the ocean, but the ocean is a valuable thing. And in most of the meetings that I've had with the ambassadors and the diplomats across, who are here from across the world, most of them tell me that they have a value assigned for their ocean space. And we have some ridiculous low calculation, but we really haven't treated the ocean as if it is a thing of value. So the first thing we need to do is to determine what is the value of the ocean space that we have. And you would have heard, and I'm going to go through these few very quickly because I really want to talk about something else, but you would have heard me talk about the ban on plastics. Don't panic. The truth is that everything that you've heard us say that we are no longer allowing into Barbados, there's already a replacement here. So when we say we're no longer allowing single-use plastic forks and knives and so on, it is because we know there is a replacement already here. All the major suppliers have already started importing it. We've been meeting with the suppliers since September. The Prime Minister made the announcement in the middle of September. So those things are already here. You're not going to have to be eating your food without a fork. You're not going to have to eat without a knife. You're not going to have to eat your food without a container. It just won't be styrofoam. And the reason that we feel this is important for us is because Barbados matters to us. And that I would like to think that all of us would love to leave a country for our children and for their children that is cleaner and healthier than the country that we currently occupy. And if I am wrong about that, I will stick around for a few minutes and we can have a conversation, or perhaps I can convince you. But the truth is we have to do things a little bit differently from the way we are now doing things. You throw a plastic bag into the gutter, and when there was a flood, I don't like to say Storm Kirk because people make so many jokes about that, the name of that storm, but the last storm that passed through Barbados. When we visited the drains, a lot of the drains, and you started clearing them, you know what was in the drains? Styrofoam, plastic bags, plastic cups, all kinds of things. Because those things do not disintegrate. At least they don't disintegrate in like 500, 600 years. And so we say if you're going to be able, not that I want you to leave here now because you have a proper biodegradable container that you're going to throw it into the gutter. But that those things will disintegrate over time, but we want you to be able to compost and properly discard of your refuge. The other thing you would hear me tackling is the sargassum seaweed. And that is perhaps one of the biggest challenges that Barbados and the rest of the Caribbean is now facing. How do we address this sargassum seaweed when none of us came as boys and as a country came prepared to deal with it? I have a team of boys and men who now do some parts of the South Coast. The NCC and the soldiers are still trying to help out in the north of the country. But you will clean the sargassum now. Take it all off the beach today. And by tomorrow, it would look as if nobody ever did any work on that beach. And then somebody's going to post on Facebook, look at the amount of sargassum, what is the minister doing? Well, I just cleared it yesterday. But the truth is, it's something that we're going to have to keep doing over and over and over and over. And when you see sargassum, it doesn't mean that we're not working, it just means that the sargassum is coming, and perhaps we would like you all to join us in taking some of that sargassum off the sea. But the Democratic Labour Party, when I came into the position, had no plan to deal with sargassum at all. And after being in office and dealing with the sargassum for a number of years, nothing that I could go and build on to say this is how we're going to continue, because governments is not about cutting off and starting back. Governments are about continuing on the good things. But it's a good thing sometimes to cut off. But they had no plan. And so we've just ordered a conveyor belt that would allow us to move some of the sargassum out of the water straight onto a truck. We've also ordered a harvester, it's a boat, that takes the sargassum straight out of the water. We're now completing a management plan with the help of the UNDP and other agencies to properly tackle the sargassum seaweed, because at the end of the day, we have to be able to do something with the seaweed. So that maybe I don't just want to take it off and dump it, I would like to take it off and convert it into fertilizer and methane gas and those kind of things. But that's what we're busy doing. But I just told you I have responsibility for a few departments. And I said during the estimates that to me the greatest and the clearest, most blatant manifestation of the dereliction of duty of the Democratic Labour Party is in the markets. You could visit any market, any time of day, and you would see a place that is completely run down, absent of care of any kind in the last 10 years. And I visited Tempe Bay today because I knew I was coming to St. Joseph, so I wanted the last piece of information. I wanted my information to be fresh. But if you leave Tempe Bay and you meet, I met Colin Jordan in Speightstown, and then I met with Eddie in Weston, and I met with Kerry's people in Paynes Bay, and I met with Neil in Pyle Bay, and I met with Ralph Thorne in Oystons, and all of the markets, you understand what I'm saying to you? Not one and not the next, according to my mother. All the markets in a state of disrepair. Every single one of Tempe Bay is a special case because that is beyond disrepair. And what I saw there, I mean, I saw it before, but when the AG calls you and say, you know, you gotta go look at Tempe Bay, you look at it different. But what I saw there, to me, is a sin. And it is a case where anybody who is a right-thinking Barbadian who is saying to themselves, let me give this Democratic Labour Party or some other political party a chance, I cannot possibly begin to conceive any situation where that could be the thinking of somebody else. Because if you saw the state of Tempe Bay, and then all the markets, you would know that the government, the former government, the Democratic Labour Party government, went to work not to work. And that they got full pay for doing no work. We used to say full pay for half day, but it's full pay for no work at all. And all of these markets are in a state of disrepair. Now, Barbados cannot export fish. I mean, I've said so before to the EU. Our legislation in some ways doesn't permit it, but the state of the markets won't allow it. We were in Bridgetown and before the end of March, and I hope to bring it all around, including Tempe Bay, before the AG asks me. But in Bridgetown, we're about to change all the countertops to stainless steel, redo all of the cupboards, fix the bathrooms, make the place look fit for purpose. So that by the end of the first year we are in government, you will not even recognize Bridgetown. Because that is what we were elected to do. And if we stay on Bridgetown for a little bit more, there is a crane. There was a crane that was bought by the government in 2009 for nearly $800,000 to be able to take boats at Oystons out of the water. It's like a hoist. $800,000, you hear me? Brand new crane. They bought the crane, drove the crane to the fisheries division in Bridgetown, and left that crane there for 10 years. To the point now where the crane doesn't work, it is rusting and it is falling apart. And for us to fix that crane is now going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because the government didn't want to use the crane. And you know why? After they bought the crane, they had to then do some remedial work to be able to utilize the crane, but they felt that that was too much. So your taxpayers' dollars and mine wasted every cent of it. And if that was not bad enough, it therefore meant that the fishermen at Oystons aren't able to take out their boats at Oystons. Criminal. Criminal. And we have the same situation at all of the markets. And that is why I feel before the year is done and the legislation is now being drafted, we've been sending a lot of work to the AG's office because he's been asking for a lot of work. But very soon you will see us having a conversation around the new legislation in fisheries and around the markets. Because we have to make these things fit for purpose. I do not feel comfortable knowing that when it rains in Bridgetown, the people who work in there get wet. No, you're not dogs. I mean, I love dogs. My dogs don't get wet. I hope you don't let your dogs get wet either. But you can't treat people then worse than dogs. We have to improve the conditions that people have to work in. And we don't get this position up here because we are great, none of us. It's because somebody in a constituency saw something in us and determined that they want us to be the persons to advance their interests. And so when we take the responsibility, we therefore have to advance other people's interests. That is why I feel personally offended when I see what is happening in a lot of these markets. Now I will fix the markets, and I will bring the markets up to scratch, the whole ministry. But I also feel that people then have to conduct themselves in a proper way in the markets. And that when you go to work, you gotta act like you're at work. And that you can't smoke in the market. And that you can't be eating food and serving fish. And that you gotta conduct yourself, you gotta look clean, you gotta wear a uniform. That's what I feel. And that is why I feel the legislation or the policy position of the government must reflect. Because I will treat you like a human being, but you must also conduct yourself as such. Because, you know, there's an analogy, people use it all the time, you get on like you in a fish market. Because people feel that in a market you could get on or should get on anyway. But it can't happen. Because we must make Barbados now fit for purpose. And so we will fix the legislation, fix the physical markets, and make sure that the markets work for people. The other thing we did in fisheries very recently is that I made a declaration early on that the derelict boats had to move. The Prime Minister is insisting that Barbados cannot look the way Barbados looks. I know she's very insistent that Grantley Adams School and the AG cannot continue to look the way Grantley Adams School looks either. But the Prime Minister is insisting that Barbados cannot look the way Barbados now looks. It is dirty. We visited Constitution River. The amount of garbage that we see people obviously just throw in the same plastics, the same styrofoam, as if they don't live in the same country that we all live in. It is not right. And we have to be able to call out one another when we see people throwing boxes through ZR windows, and it's not right. And that's not how Barbados is supposed to look. And I feel like when I look through the fish markets, and I go to the boatyard, there's not, the truth is Patent Bay doesn't really have a lot, maybe two, of derelict boats. Boats that have been there in the boatyard, some for 10 years, some for 12 years, and some for more. Just there, because they feel the government space is their space. Now you could park a boat and claim that this is your space, and you know what I mean, the boat run into ruin. And not only is it run into ruin, but what does that do? That prevents another man who wants to come and legitimately use this space from being able to use this space. It doesn't work for me. And so that is why we said you had to move the derelict boats. And if you visit Oysins now, there's a big area because we've been able to clear a number of those derelict boats. But the funny thing is that as soon as we made the declaration, and the AG may have to advise, people started running now and start putting like 2 brush strokes of paint on the side, on the side of the boats, or they change a wood, you understand, to say that they're working on these boats that haven't moved in 10, 12, 15 years. Some boats that are in the water that haven't sailed in the same amount of time. Come on. Come on. I mean, at the end of the day, Barbados has to be judged by standards that are Barbadian. And I suspect, and I would submit to you that these are not Barbadian standards. And that is why I feel as if we gotta elevate the way the fish markets and the boatyards now look. Now before I close, let me tell you very quickly about the port. And the AG knows a lot about the port because he sits on the Security Council. But when we took responsibility for the port, you know, we had a lot of issues with some of the contracts in the port. And some were so big and so egregious that they really were, in my estimation, a sin for any Barbadian person to be associated with them. Some of them. But let's put the contracts aside for now, because those contracts, when we came in, we asked for the contracts to be renegotiated, and many of those contracts are being renegotiated to make sure that your dollars are not being wasted. And there's some that never made the press, but those are being renegotiated too. Because you have to be fair. And while I will never be unfair to anybody, I ain't gonna let anybody be unfair to me neither. I'm a fool, and I know you ain't a fool. But you can't decide because this is the government, you want to jerk out the government. And if I tell you, I say it all the time, I say, give me a quotation for this cupboard. Hey, Kadir, you know it costs about $500. I'm telling you $25,000. Because it's the government. No, but I believe in being fair. I will give you the work, but you gotta be fair. And you gotta win the bid. Because that's not how it is. Nobody ain't own me. I don't own nobody, nothing. Well, I owe the bank and other few people, but legitimately, apart from that, I own nobody, nothing. You can't call my name. But you gotta deliver what you say you are going to deliver on behalf of the people. And that's how I feel, and I feel very, very strongly about it. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the Democratic Labour Party used to boast or talk about this: Barbados is more than an economy, it is a society. And that sounds really good. But if you don't get your economy running and rolling and firing on all cylinders, as Marsha and Ryan and the Prime Minister are trying desperately to do, how do you finance a society? And I say so to you as a social scientist. You really can't divorce the two. But I feel that every time I see taxpayers' dollars being wasted, that is stopping somebody from being able to get welfare. Or when I see you messing around with people, NAS, I tell myself, my mother now is at the state where she's dependent, and I soon did, where we're going to be needing the pensions from NAS, and you spending people's money like it is your own. So I think about all of those things when I'm doing things. But in the port is a security agency. And when we came in, there were a number of cameras in the port that weren't working. And we asked, like, why aren't these cameras working? Like, how could you, who's watching the watchman? I mean, somebody got to watch the watchman. And now we asked for the cameras to be fixed, and they're doing now, and the chairman of the board spoke about it during the estimates debate. But very soon you're going to be seeing all of the cameras in the port being replaced, and more cameras being placed at strategic places to make sure that nothing, no, you know, people aren't necessarily prone to evil, but just to make sure that nothing happens. And then we determined that we had to fix the scanners. Now the port had one functional scanner, like a mobile scanner, not a body scanner. Some that scan containers and so on, which meant that a significant portion of the cargo that came through the port would leave without being scanned. Less than 6% of the cargo leaving the port was scanned. Less than 6%. Now, another way to say that is over 94% was unscanned. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if 94% of the cargo leaving the port is unscanned, that there is a higher propensity for something to be inside those unscanned containers. But we said no. The Prime Minister and the AG, when they met, and with the Security Council, one of the directives that came to me was, first of all, was that there was a second security scanner in there, fix it, because they had the Democratic Labour Party let that scanner stay down for 4 years. You gotta ask yourself why, but anyhow, ask for later. 4 years, fix it, and then ordered another scanner, and now looking at the possibility of a fourth scanner, because we want to make sure that nothing nefarious comes through that port. Nothing that could harm your children or mine, your friends and family or mine, because that is the kind of country that we want Barbados to be, the best that Barbados can be. And so we feel that we are now in a position to say, truly, that we are doing as much as we can do with the resources that we have to bring some order to a country that has clearly gone out of order in the last 10 years. And the one thing that brings me great joy as I close is that when I travel, not only in the Caribbean but across the world, I was in Kenya. And there was a presentation being done by a Canadian diplomat, a very senior Canadian diplomat. And at the end he was introduced to me as the only blue economy minister in the world, which he found to be an amazing feat, and gave me a lot of kudos for something. That's really what the Prime Minister did, not me. But I was the only blue economy minister in the world. And he came to me and he said to me, not that he met Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, or that he met some fancy world leader. He came to me and he said, I met your Prime Minister, and I have never met anyone like her. Now, if that does not make you feel good, then nothing will. Because I felt very, very good to be Barbadian. In fact, he went on and he said there was a point where the meeting stalled. And he said he was saying to himself, if the Barbadian Prime Minister was here, she would say, let us get on with it. So he is inspired by her. And I am inspired by her. And the rest of us all inspired by her. Because we all know that she's going to work every day and working very, very hard for the good of this country. In fact, we are all going to work every day and working very, very hard for the good of this country. And like Marsha said in the end of her speech, I will say the same. Just stay with us. Just stay with us. We did not inherit a smooth road. It is impossible for it to be smooth. We did not inherit things functioning. It is impossible for them to function overnight. But the difference between them and who we are is that we are determined to make wrong things right. And we are determined to serve every single day in your interest. And we will not come back to you and tell you lies and statements of grandeur. We will tell you these are the facts. And this is what we have done. Transition could always be a little bit difficult. But believe me, we are going to get through this together. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thanks very much, Ryan. My president said that I can't invite people to speak in St. Joseph and expect not to say anything. The truth is I was hoping for easy time this evening. I found myself in the press perhaps more often than I would like to be. But still, I'm happy to follow the directions that my president gives. I won't be long because I know that you will have questions and answers. You will have questions and they will have answers. I think everybody knows that the start of the year for us in Barbados has not been easy. And since January, I've had added to my portfolio the responsibility for police. That has proven to be a greater challenge in this particular day and age than it was when I last had it. It is amazing how things change in just 10, 12 years. When I was last Attorney General, the big upsurge in crime that we had to deal with, believe it or not, was burglaries. Burglaries. And those burglaries were connected to the drug trade, because as fast as we could seize drugs off of the streets, the people who the drugs belonged to had to find a way to replace that income. Often they would owe somebody for the drugs, so they got to find the money. So drugs and burglaries were inextricably connected. But in just 10 short years, we have now had to deal, as they say, frontally with a new phenomenon of guns and drugs. I almost wish that we would go back to the burglary days. So much easier then. In those days, what was happening was they would break into your house, steal your jewelry, and send your jewelry down to St. Vincent to pay for drugs which would get sent up. Or send your jewelry down to St. Vincent to pay for drugs that the police were lucky enough to seize. So in 10 years, Barbados has not just been transformed in terms of a virtually destroyed economy, we've also had to reckon with perhaps the most evil of things to confront our society. I was overseas, I only came back in yesterday, and about 10 people sent me a particular video. And it was a video of some young men at a social event. And one of them had 2 huge guns. I'm sure some of y'all have seen it. 2 huge guns. They tell me that those are not guns, those are rifles. Somebody told me they were AK-47s. And he was dancing with them, one in his left and one in his right. And the crowd seemed to be relishing this kind of activity. I remember that I had a time, oh, by the way, Charles, please stand up. Charles Griffith, our neighbor. I remember that they had a time when, in order to be a celebrity at a fete, you had to dress hard. Whatever that meant in a particular point in time, it might have been small bottom pants. Another year, it might be a bell bottom pants. But being a celebrity at a fete was a factor of how much money you had to spend at the bar and how hard you dress. And now, being a celebrity at a fete has to do with your ability to wave around the firearm. This phenomenon is one that vexes the law enforcement authority of Barbados. And it vexes them for many reasons. Some I can't go into. But it is on our streets. And we have vowed, the Prime Minister, myself, and all the members of our cabinet, to do all that we have to do to clean up our streets. Now, Kurt mentioned the scanners. You need to appreciate that guns of that size and in those numbers are not coming into Barbados in a little postal packet. They're coming in huge shipments. Huge shipments. There are some things that in our National Security Council, when they get a briefing, I usually leave with a headache. But suffice it to say that the reports that we are getting are not comforting. And we have to approach this in a dual fashion. We have to stop guns from coming in, and we have to get the guns off the streets. Now, in case there are some of us who think that this is a city phenomenon, in case there are some of us who believe that this thing only happens in Wildy and in the Bayland and in Chapman Lane and in Silver Hill, such a person is completely wrong. Because even in tranquil, peaceful, idyllic little Bathsheba, we are beginning to see the influence of firearms coming into our communities. The shootings were all in town, and then last weekend we had one in the Newberry Thorpe's Cottage area. Now, every community in Barbados is important to us. You know, in some countries you will drive for 4 days before you get to the other side. It is no longer than the time it takes to get a transfer board bus, if you get one, from town to Bathsheba, from town to Bathsheba, to see those influences coming into our community. We've had situations in the Horsell area. Mr. Kelman, I believe you would know what we're talking about. So when we talk about these things, we have to recognize that there's a risk that being small exposes us all to. I'm sure that 30 years ago, the Crab Hill that we know today was very different then. So we have to move to protect all of Barbados and all of our society. And I know that there's some people who want the police to solve the problem, but they don't want the police to do the job. They want the police to find firearms, but not if it means that they got to execute a search warrant at them. They want our society to be safe, but they don't want to accept that my son or my daughter may be an instrument for this kind of illegality. But that can't work. That can't work. Each of us have a vested interest in what is going on in our society. simply because when gun violence breaks out, so far it appears to have been targeted. But I know that you remember only too well Krapov of 2017, when gunshots broke out on Spring Garden Highway on a Kadooment day, and several people were shot, one person died. But, you know, this is the Barbados that we have to deal with today. So, if nothing else, before I get to question and answers, if nothing else, I want to urge, I want to entreaty, I want to plead with all of you and all of us to remember that we are in this together. We're in this together. There is not a family in Barbados that is immune to violence because he or she might live in a big house with tall walls and cameras. You may live there, but you probably don't work there. And sooner or later you have to leave there, whether it's going to the supermarket or going to a funeral or something. All of us have a vested interest in helping to root this out. Now, that may cause some of us to clash with a neighbor, because you may know something and you may be wondering if you should tell the police. I'd rather you tell the police now than wait until somebody in the community gets injured, maybe yourself, and run and play you going and tell the police then. We all have an obligation to each other as citizens of Barbados. I look forward to the day when, you know, everybody calling me about a firearm license. It's one of the bad things about being an Attorney General, because everybody seems to want a gun. I don't know what for. I don't know why people feel that they should all have a firearm. But you know what? It is becoming more and more a situation where people, average people like Jerry, like Joe maybe, like other individuals, including women, who believe that now with this kind of violence in our society, the only thing left for them to do is to arm themselves. Well, I don't quite subscribe to that. I spoke to a businessman recently. He arrived home and the fellas attacked him with a knife and carried away his gun. So now the next body they're going to attack with the gun that they got from the businessman who had it. Because all the gun that he wanted, he either didn't have a chance to use it, didn't know how to use it, or was perhaps too scared to reach for it. So, or all the above. Now, that is an aside, because I really don't want to talk about gun licenses, but I'm trying to make the point, that people are beginning to feel that they need to resort to that to protect themselves. I know that the police force, given the opportunity and given the equipment and the resources, and we are giving them those things, will get to the bottom of this. It doesn't happen overnight though. It took years to reach this point. It took years to reach a point where, you know, I'm sure that all the heads in here would remember the newspaper reports of somebody getting caught with a gun, probably an old rusty pistol that come back from Panama in the 1940s, and maybe one bullet. But the fact is that we've had a Firearms Act on our books, which took away the right of the magistrate to grant bail. So even back in the 90s, we were beginning to clamp down on it, even though it was not yet a feature. But that has obviously not worked. So what is my message to you in this particular environment? Firstly, it is not, your societies are not immune from violence, from gun violence, so don't feel that way. Every society in Barbados, whether it is Sandy Lane or Sweet Bottom, all of them, or Sugar Hill, all of them are susceptible to that kind of activity. Secondly, all of us have a vested interest in getting to the root of the problem. But thirdly, all of us will benefit from a safer and more secure Barbados. So, Mr. President, I will stop there, and I will allow Ryan to come to the podium, and I hope that you have some questions for not me, but certainly Marcia and Kirk.
Certainly we want to thank Marcia, Kirk and Dale for sharing with us this evening. And as they